Oh,
Hello.
hello, we're on.
Hey.
How are
I'm
you?
good. God, my big head's in here.
Get your
How are
angles
you?
right.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Oh,
Thanks
bless God.
so much for coming
Oh,
on. Got
my
lots of people
pleasure.
joining us, which is exciting. So welcome. I'm Wiz, the co-founder of Valerie, and this is the amazing Anna Lancaster, who's a hypnotherapist. I'd love you to introduce yourself properly and tell everyone, I won't do it justice,
Oh,
what you
bless.
do.
Okay, well, my name's Anna Lancaster. I am a clinical hypnotherapist and a RTT practitioner, which basically means I'm an expert at rewiring the mind. So I
Fantastic.
look at people's limiting beliefs, habits, behaviors, anything you don't want, and change your subconscious programming to make it what you do want to get the results that you desire, really.
Fantastic. Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. We're in the middle of a campaign called We See You, which is all about the different feelings and emotions that come up in perimenopause. And the theme that we've been talking about this week is identity. So I thought you'd be the perfect
Oh,
person to talk to about rewiring your brain because, yeah, a lot of emotions come up being angry, frustrated, confused about what's going on with a woman's body, how they're feeling, everything from what's happening in their mind to their body to their emotions. And I personally think that although there's a lot of physical symptoms with perimenopause, I think it also brings a huge amount of opportunity as well to
absolutely.
actually look at your identity and think, well, actually, who I was in my 20s or my 30s, going into my 40s, maybe I'm something different. And then 50s again, it's a real opportunity to, I suppose, reassess your sense of identity. So it all sounds quite easy saying, "Oh, I'll have a new identity," but then it's how do you actually do that, and how do you kind of, I suppose, reprogram your mind, which obviously you're that expert at. So excited to delve into some questions with you tonight.
Oh, perfect. No, I'm looking forward to talking about it. It's something I'm quite passionate about because I deal with or work with a lot of women who are at that stage. A big portion of the women I work with certainly are at a stage between kind of, 40 and 55, which is
Mhm.
that pivotal time where they're not feeling themselves. They're going through all of these different changes in their body, in their minds, in their lives, because life has changed, it's going into a different phase. They often don't know or feel like they know who they are anymore. But this does offer a really big opportunity as well as like dealing with those challenges. So yeah, looking forward to talking to you about all of that tonight.
Amazing. So yeah, I suppose it can be emotionally bonkers, this phase that we call perimenopause, which can go on for a year, 4 years, 7 years, 10 years, depends on the woman. And I think a lot of people don't even understand necessarily that it might be perimenopause when they're feeling a lot of these emotional changes that are happening. A lot of them are asking, like, who am I now? I suppose as an expert in the mind, what is going on in the mind to be having these shifts and changes of
Yeah,
thoughts?
a lot is going on in the mind. I mean, our hormones are at a volcanic period where they're up, they're down, they're doing lots of different things, and it's channeled by the fact that certainly chemicals that we have, such as cortisol, the stress hormone, is making everything a lot worse. So we've got estrogen, which is declining, and that's very much there for the regulation of the good hormones, the serotonin, the feel good chemicals, and that. As that drops, that really starts to lead to a bit of irritability, anxiety, which obviously is two of the key things which I think we all can feel. And with stress, because cortisol is very linked into estrogen, it just channels it and makes it a whole lot worse. So we find it a lot more difficult to deal with stressful situations than probably we would have before. And then there's cortisol sensitivity. So with these hormonal shifts, the brain generally becomes more sensitive to it as well. So the stress that we're experiencing, where probably we could have dealt with stuff, we just aren't able to in the same way. So with those two hormones going, and then underlying that is progesterone, the other one, which that's the one that really upsets our sleep. And as we well know, if we're not getting a good night's sleep, it doesn't matter what else is going right or wrong in your life at any point in your life. When you're suddenly not having good sleep on top of everything else, it makes it so much more difficult to deal with the day. The frustrations, the irritability, the tiredness, it all combines alongside with all the other things. And then we also have all of the physical things that happen at that same time. We've got the sleep disturbances, we've got the hot sweats, we've got all of that, which again, underpins the irritability, it causes frustration. We start to not know who we are. And then alongside that, we've got the societal like issues, you know, where everyone aging isn't always put in a positive light, you know. Who's heard the, you know, women age like a wine, or, you know, something, those negative things that we're told or we kind of believe, and it sits in there and you think, God, I'm getting to 40 or 50, my time's up. I mean, what more have I got to give? The truth is everything.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, I'll come on to this later, but your 40s are taking you into this new place where you haven't been before, and ever more now it's becoming so much more possible to reach your full potential. You think you've had it, you know, good until that point, it's released, but at this time you're going through all of this, and on top of that, the brain fog, the, you know, the loss of identity, thinking, you know, I've gone through this period, I can no longer maybe become a mother, or you know, I've done that and I can't be one anymore, or maybe I haven't done that yet and now I'm worried that I can't. So the mental, the physical, it's a big combination that's going on and changing at this time.
Yeah, thanks for explaining. It's a lot.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
lot. Sorry, I think probably made people feel a lot
No,
worse, but there's a lot going on, so you're not alone. It's not.
no, there's lots that can be done about it as well. And it's, yeah, I think it does stop us in our tracks as
Yeah.
well, because I think very often we've gone through life doing everything that we think we should do, particularly as women, and yeah, what our peers think, what we should do, told by from our teachers at school, our parents, all the way up to colleagues and our bosses, and yeah, and then I think we kind of get stopped in our tracks by our body and how we're feeling, and our emotions. But it's a real opportunity to reassess, well, actually, what do I want,
Yeah.
and start putting yourself first. So that although it can be hard and a bit of a struggle, I think there's a definite opportunity to do a real shift.
Yeah, to the different phase. I mean, we go through phases, and to be honest, I certainly wouldn't want to go back to my teenage years, or, you know, even my 20s if I'm
Yeah.
looking at it now. But yeah, so yeah.
So I mean, for people on here might not know what hypnotherapy is, or might think it sounds a bit woo woo, but it's definitely backed by science. So I'd
Yeah.
love if you could explain a little bit more about what it is, and so people can relate to it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it did or does have that thing, still a little bit of being quite woo-woo, but actually it's science. It's science. We all naturally do it with every single day. It's a brainwave level. So, you know, when we're talking now, we're at beta, which is our conscious mind. We're consciously talking. When we go into a meditative state, that goes into alpha. And then we go into theta, hypnosis, and we go into delta, sleep. And we go through these brain waves when we wake up in the morning, from delta to theta to alpha to beta, and the same way in the evening. So we go into a hypnotic state. But hypnosis in its entirety is just taking you into a really focused state where your conscious mind, your thinking mind, shifts back. Your subconscious, your non-critical mind comes forward. And to give you a bit more of an idea about kind of how this works, we have two parts of the mind, which I've mentioned there, our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. And our conscious mind is our critical thinking, logical mind. And our subconscious mind is our feeling, our habits, our behaviors. It's also our autonomic system in our body. It's that. And our subconscious drives 95% of our behavior. Our conscious mind is only 5%, which is, when you're looking at the comparative, which is why when often you do talking therapy and you use your critical mind and you talk through things, and there's a place for talking therapy, I'd never say otherwise, but you kind of can sometimes get to a solution, you can think about it, but you can't change how you feel about it. Whereas with hypnosis, we go back into your subconscious to work out why you feel the way you do and rewire and change from there. And to go even a little bit shade deeper, our subconscious mind is predominantly created between the ages of 0 and 7. So this is really primitive. And literally because between the ages of 0 and 7, we are in hypnosis. We're at that lower brainwave state, theta. So then if you imagine, we're creating our whole world. We're creating our beliefs on health, wealth, money, our parent, like ourself, our view of the world. All of our beliefs are created then, but they're not necessarily our beliefs. So they're created from what? Our environment, our parents, our society, school, the media. So we just absorb them like a little sponge. And when we create a belief, we look for something to support it. So, for example, you know, someone says, oh, you're the pretty one. you then get invited to the school thing, and then you become the pretty one, and you're like, well, that's because of that. And then you add another one, and then you get asked out, well, the boys, because I'm the pretty one. Or the same thing if you're putting it as I'm the intelligent one. A parent says to you, you're so clever. You're like, I'm clever. And then you get an A at school, and then you support it because you also work harder, because it naturally is what you do, because that's your identity, you're the clever one. But all of our, beliefs, when you're told money doesn't grow on trees, that could influence how you feel about money. All of these beliefs you start to build, and it's good. But then you become your conscious self, you're who you are. And when your desires now don't necessarily link with your subconscious programming, that's predominantly from the ages of 0 and 7, but then, changes by repetition a little bit. When they don't align, then you start to get these self-sabotaging behaviors, these feelings of not feeling your authentic self, these feelings of who am I, these feelings of, not reaching the potential that you can. So when you can actually start to identify what's going wrong, you can then start to change and get to what's going right. But hypnosis is a very good tool in which to do that, because you're going back to that subconscious mind, finding out the why, changing it from that point and moving forward. So there's a very long-rooted view of what hypnosis is.
No, it's fascinating though, because I've kind of heard people say before, like lots of things when you go through perimenopause, a lot of childhood trauma comes up, and I suppose that kind of really links to everything you're saying there.
Absolutely, because certainly things that trigger us now, there's a reason it triggers us. And certainly when you're going through perimenopause and you're unable to deal with stress in the same way you are, things trigger you in a different way. So unresolved trauma that you might have gone through. And when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be anything bad. It might just be that questioning yourself, not feeling good enough, not feeling you can do something, and it rears its ugly head again when you're getting to that stage, when you're going through the perimenopause or menopause, and you're starting to doubt yourself and have this like disbelief in yourself and being like, can I do that? And it goes down to a deeper rooted reason of why. But that's when certainly I work with people, and I work with a lot of clients with hypnosis, certainly within perimenopause, to reduce stress. Because by reducing stress, what do? Give them a better ability to cope. Certainly a lower cortisol level helps bring up the serotonin when we're in a hypnotic state, the serotonin, the good chemicals that help you feel better in general. But also to start to rebuild who you are, your authentic self, to pull away those limiting beliefs that a lot of us start to feel when you get that imposter syndrome, or we've all been there, when we start to get that self-doubt, and then you go into a self-doubt spiral, and you're like, I can't do anything, I can't do anything right, I'm not a good mum, I'm not a good employee, what can I give? And that's often, when you start to question yourself, you can go into that dark place. So it's very good at lifting, rewiring, changing those thought patterns and getting you to where you want to be.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And just thinking about that, I suppose that childhood thing as well, it kind of always makes me think about, it doesn't have to be trauma so much. I kind of often think, well, just even with when you're a child and you're told off or told to be quiet, and if you're really sensitive, you could take that really personally, and that could just be something that then you're afraid to use your voice or to speak up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of some of those small things that can feel like nothing at the time or seem like nothing, but actually have a big impact on you when you're younger.
Totally. I had a lady come to me actually around this stage, and she was going through a divorce, because it was that sort of time. She was going through body changes, hormonal changes. She was changing job, and she just felt like her world was falling apart. And it all went back to this unbelief she had in herself, because her mum always kind of said to her when she was younger that her sister was the one, her sister was the competent one. Her sister was, that comparative parents have with the children, not meaning to really cause, not even thinking probably that they're causing any issues, but the comparative gave her a thing. She's like, I'm not like my sister. I'm not as good as my sister. Whereas actually, when we reframed it, re-looked at it, she's totally as good as her sister. She was like, I've achieved more than my sister, because she'd driven herself to do more. And she's like, actually, no, I don't want to be anything like my sister. I'm me. And it empowered her. It actually shifted how she felt. She started a company on her own. She divorced her husband, got rid of him, and just started to re-own her life. And it was her new phase. It was a new phase of her life.
Fantastic. That's so exciting. And if people are feeling in like a haze of brain fog, of don't know where to turn, what would your tips be, I suppose, for people to start trying to reclaim some of their bold and brilliant selves that they may have felt before, or a new version of that?
Do you know what? I think one of the things we certainly as women, and I hate saying that as a thing, but like, we're very hard on ourselves. The words we say to ourselves and the things we think, if we said them to our friends, we wouldn't have many friends. But we sit there and we'll be like, you're stupid, you're looking old, you're doing this, we will really be critical about ourselves. And when we use those harsh words repeatedly, it goes into your subconscious. So although we're thinking it with our conscious mind, it will drift into the subconscious, because one, we're repeating it, which is how the subconscious mind learns, and it's locking onto it. It's like, and I give this as an example, because the whole thing about affirmations, and I say to anyone, have you tried them? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, did they work? They're like, no. Because 95% of the time they don't work, because when you say critical words to yourself, when you say them, you feel it. You feel crap about yourself. You feel awful. When you sit there and say, I'm confident, I'm beautiful, I mean, you don't believe it. There's no feeling. You're just saying a rote routine of words that you think you should say because you've been told to. Whereas when you're saying these harsh negative words, they really stick in. So I think the one thing to say to anyone who's going through this overwhelm, this self-doubt and all of that, is to kind of just sit there and be kind to yourself. Like, talk to yourself like you would your friend as the very first step. Be like, if my friend was coming to me and saying, I'm going through this really shitty time and I'm not feeling myself, what would you do? For a fact, you'd be like, right, come on, let's have a glass of wine, let's sit down, you would be kind to them. And it's that whole thing of bringing a bit of kindness back to yourself in your first step. When you can do that, my second step with this is visualization. It is one of the strongest tools we have in creating a vision we want. Often I have people who come to me and they say, I'm not getting to where I want to be. And I'm like, where do you want to be? They're like, I don't know. It's like, okay. So you don't know. It's like firing an arrow, like a gun, and being like, okay, the bullseye's over there, but you're hitting over there because you don't know where you want to be. You kind of need to know what you want, how you want to feel, have a bit of an idea of that, and visualize it. Because when you're visualizing something and you do it with your eyes closed, go into a bit of a meditative state, you don't have to do anything crazy, just close your eyes, to be honest, and start to go inward and visualize yourself being yourself, feeling confident. Because what you're doing, maybe do a scenario. I often walk through something with my clients whereby we put them in a place where they're feeling strong, feeling confident, maybe doing something successfully if it's a presentation or just something that they want to achieve. Picture yourself doing it in the most perfect way. Fire every single neuron in your brain, because when you're visualizing something, your brain doesn't know if it's actually happening or not. So what you're doing is you're firing and wiring the same neural pathways. And rather than when you're sitting there worrying about everything that could go wrong, when you're sitting there worrying what happens, you're firing and wiring those negative pathways when we go into those spirals, which is making your body release cortisol and all the stress hormone like you're having that situation when you're not. And as we know, 85% of our worries don't actually happen. It's only the 15%. And normally the 15%, when it does go wrong, you handle it better than you would. So try the opposite. And rather than worrying, visualize things going right. What you'll start to do is release the chemicals as if it's going right. So a situation that you've got coming up or something, or how you want to be. Start to train your body, rehearse it in your body of how you would be. What that does is have the same chemical biology rebalance in your body, and you start to do that. And that has that effect on you where you start to feel calmer. So you're not feeling as stressed, you're not feeling as anxious about what's going on. You're releasing good chemicals in your body, which are going to work very well with this chemical imbalance, this hormonal imbalance. And you're starting to feel more positive about where you're going forward and not feeling as worried. And it's very grounding, and it's very thing. And then when you come to that, it starts to feel familiar to you. So if you've got that stressful scenario, you walk in, it doesn't feel so scary because you've already been there in the mind. When you go there in the mind, you go there in the body, and it all works a lot better. So that's kind of that, because I think a lot about kind of the placebo effect with things. So, for example, there's a lot of noise about perimenopause, and there's a lot of people talking about it. And I think my experience certainly was, I got to the stage and I started to create false symptoms in myself. I was like, am I having hot flushes? Am I having this? And am I having that? And I started to get, I was like, gosh, maybe I'm having early onset perimenopause. I know this lasts a long while. I went to my doctors, and they took my bloods and they did them over a period, because I went to a menopause clinic because I didn't believe my doctor.
Yeah.
And I had it all checked out, and they did it, and they were like, you're fine, you're exactly where you should be. But I started to bring on the symptoms because I'd started to think about it. But the same thing can happen in reverse. Not saying that you don't get perimenopause symptoms, but if you start to use your mind and start to tell it, like work with it and say, because your body and your mind listen to everything you say. If you say, my body is handling this as well as it can, my body is handling this beautifully, my body is handling this, and then you'll start to create a feedback loop where you feel a bit more positive about it, so you're releasing better chemicals. When you're releasing better chemicals, you're not having the outward things as strongly, and it's a more positive feedback loop with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that, and the alternative, that could work on the other way.
Yeah, and it's all what we feed our brains. And it's certainly one of the messages we say a lot is perimenopause is the least interesting thing about you, because it shouldn't define you. And again, going back to that, seeing it as an opportunity. And yes, we use it as we've had debates internally about we still do have the debates. Do we not even ever talk about perimenopause? But then how do you communicate what you do as a brand? So yeah, because it's interesting, and it needs to be talked about, because people need to be aware of it, because menopause is being talked about a lot, but perimenopause isn't. So people aren't really understanding what's going on with their bodies, which actually is causing a lot more confusion, in my opinion, and certainly my experience was what the hell was happening to my body. And like now I know, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I get it, but that doesn't have to define me. And now I'm like, well, brilliant, I've got talking about it all day, every day, so I'm going to be the most equipped person there is out there, hopefully. But yeah, I often sometimes think to myself, well, oh God, now am I just thinking this is going to happen as well? So but it's and people have experienced it in different ways as well. So it's all about how you talk to yourself ultimately.
And truthfully, I mean, with it as well, like one of the other, I mean, we all know what the placebo effect is, and for anyone who doesn't, it's essentially your mind's healing reaction to something by the belief that it's having the medication or the treatment that gives it the result when it doesn't have it. So a sugar pill rather than the actual medication. So also with your wonderful product that does work well, if you're taking that and having the belief this is helping me, the combined effort of that plus your belief that this is going to cause good things for my body, it's going to ease things, it's going to ease symptoms, make me feel better. It's a combined dual effect. It's only going to double the effect. It will only help it. So it's work with your mind and work with what you've got. And I think it's brilliant, with what you guys are doing, because I've tried it even though I'm not sure, but it's helped me, it's given me energy. I feel so much better. And whether but that's what it's all about, is knowing what's out there. And I do think there needs to be the conversation and the education, because for so long I remember when my mum went through it, nobody talked about it, and I think my dad just shunned her off in a room. Oh, she's having one of those days. So the conversation needs to be there, so that
definitely. And it affects everyone. It affects, obviously affects 50% of the
50%
population
of the
that are women,
population.
but then it affects men as well, because we will have mothers, sisters, daughters, colleagues at work, interacting with people all the time. So
100%.
it's super important to understand it as a phase of life, just like we do with puberty. So it's just the other end of the spectrum, really.
Absolutely.
It's a bit more chaotic.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it is. I mean, my son's going. He's heading towards that stage. I'm just kind of seeing the the early stage, the puberty side of it, where they act out. Because they don't know what's happening to them. At least now we kind of have that knowledge, and can work with it, I think. And I think it's really nice and empowering seeing women coming together in this way and kind of talking about it and having the conversation when it was never spoken about before.
No, completely. And I think this is also a generation that, well, personally for me, I grew up with being very ladette. So I completely ignored any kind of, I just kind of didn't really understand much about my periods until like late 30s. I read a book and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
Wow.
it's mad. So it is empowering to be able to talk about it and connect with people around it. And I still feel weird talking about it, or I'll now talk to my co-founder and talk about my period. I think, oh, I feel a bit weird saying about this, or the things I've written on LinkedIn in the last year that I never thought I'd write about, a period or menopause or
Yeah.
like vaginas or all of these things. It's it is empowering.
It is, no, it is. I think it's also like that step we're looking now at, like, moving forward. Like, you look at Demi Moore recently. She's
Yeah,
60 something years old and at the top of her game, earned her first award
yeah,
and looks fabulous. And obviously she's had a little bit of help.
yeah,
Um, but that's available now.
yeah,
We can change the narrative that used to be, men got better with age, they got more distinguished, they got their value there, and women,
yeah,
you know, they weren't seen on TV after the age of 40
yeah,
something. Whereas now
yeah.
it's that whole narrative's changing. You can be more successful. You can jump into that second phase of your life, because when you get into your 40s, 50s, when you go into that, you have all that knowledge,
Yeah.
you have all that experience, and it shouldn't be so kind of overlooked that you're going for that stage, and it is a transitional one. But you can really harness it. You can really harness, if you the narrative you're telling yourself, because our whole reality is based on the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole reality is based on our belief system. From a very simple kind of analogy that I use a lot with my clients, when two people getting on a tube in the morning, and one has the belief, they've grown up in a family who are very positive and they're like, life is good, and their belief is everyone's intrinsically good. And the other person getting on the tube, they're a lot more negative, and their belief is that people are intrinsically quite bad. So they're both getting on the tube, and the person who believes people are good, they see the man getting up for the old woman, they see the little child playing with the dog, and they see the couple having a loving encounter together. The one who believes everything's negative and that, they see the woman making a man get up for her. They see the dog making loads of noise and annoying everyone. They see the couple having an over PDA. Exactly the same tube they're on, but their belief system creates their reality. And I think the strongest thing for any of the women thinking is change your belief system. You're not, tired. This is a new transition. Change your belief system. And that's where hypnosis comes in so strongly, because it's a lot easier to do it in hypnosis.
Yeah.
But you can do it anyway. You can sit and be like, okay, the narrative's changing in society. This isn't the end. This is my next transition. What am I doing? Empower yourself.
Exactly. Go get it.
Yeah.
Amazing. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you about and talk to us a little about how you work as well, so
Yeah.
where they can find you.
So I have a clinic in Chelsea, but I work internationally with clients all over the world. And I do RTT, which is rapid transformational therapy, which works very quickly, and clinical hypnotherapy solutions focused. But I tend to have a big 2-hour session with people. We go in there, we get in, we look at where the beliefs are, where you are now, where you want to be, and we make that happen. And then I give them a hypnosis to take away. We work generally over a 3-month period, but one session a month. Although some people from one session, they're like, I'm great, I'm out. That's the gem of it. But they just have to book an initial discovery call where we'll sit and have a bit of a talk about what they're going through, where they are, if they're feeling stuck, where they want to be, more importantly. And then we book them in from there.
Nice. Brilliant. And that's all on your website and Instagram
Yes,
bio, I assume. Brilliant.
absolutely. Yeah, at Anna Lancaster Therapy, which is where we are.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was absolutely fascinating.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope I didn't talk too much. I can go on.
No, not at all. It's amazing. It's always fascinating to hear, different ways that we can try and rewire our brains.
Perfect. All right. Well,
Great.
thank you very much.
All right. I'll see
See
you
you
soon.
later.
Bye.
Bye.